Hello, everybody. Welcome to Cognitive Dissonance Part 2. So, last time we talked about the general idea of cognitive dissonance, and today we're going to talk about the different dissonance paradigms. So, there's four main paradigms in dissonance. What does a paradigm mean? Paradigm means like a structure or a way that you can see cognitive dissonance, specifically in experiments. So, there's specifically, we're talking about ways that this has been done, where cognitive dissonance has been shown in different experiments that have been done over the years. And so there's the four main kinds of dissonance paradigms, and you should think about these in terms of how they conduct their experiment, like what is causing the dissonance inside each of these experiments. The first one we need to talk about is induced compliance. Induced compliance, we'll go through in just a second, but induced compliance is marked by the use of a counter-attitudinal behavior. What am I talking about? Induced compliance? Well, let me show you. Do you remember the $1 and $20 experiment? That was an induced compliance experiment. So induced compliance. So the participants had to comply with something they were going to do. And so let's review what happened with the Festinger Carlsmith 1959 studies. So everyone did the boring task. And then everyone said, hey, thank you for doing this. We're going to let you, we need you to actually be the person to explain it to the next participant. And everyone said that they were going to do that. Okay. The imbalance happens when people lie, right? So, because everybody in here, they went and they lied to the next participant. They said, oh, yeah, no, this is a really interesting task. I think it's going to be fine. Everybody lied about that. It was a boring task. So the behavior is lying. The belief about yourself is that I'm an honest person, and that clashes. It creates that sort of imbalance. A counter-attitudinal behavior is a behavior that is outside of what you really think, right? So, for example, lying is hopefully a counter-attitudinal behavior for most everybody, meaning that it goes against their evaluation of the specific behavior of lying, right? So that creates the dissonance. They were induced to comply with something, right? They were said, hey, you need to do this for us. Please, will you please do that? They're induced to comply with that behavior. That behavior is often a counter-attitudinal behavior. So I'm going to induce you to go lie, and then you go and you lie. You perform the counter-attitudinal behavior. Performing a behavior that's out against your attitude, what you really think, that clashes, creates the imbalance, creates the dissonance. So, for example, in this particular case, that imbalance was created by lying when you think you're an honest person. Well, the inducement then was the money, right? How much money you were going to get to, to do this particular behavior. Half of the participants received $1 and the other half received $20. Now remember, this is 1959. $20 is a lot of money. $20 is actually a lot of money. And so when the negative arousal occurs, right? So the idea, oh man, I don't think that lying is good, but I just lied. Class, but wait a minute. Why did I do that? Why did I do that counter-attitudinal behavior? Oh, I was induced. Oh, I did it for $20. Think of like $20 like $100 today, right? So think of it like a lot of money. It's a lot of money. Yeah, I did. It's true. I did lie, but $20. And so this person's like, I'd lie to my grandma for $20. It's really worth calling that boring task interesting because, $20 is a lot of money. So what happens here is you got the imbalance, okay? Your behavior versus what you really think. That causes negative arousal. It causes more arousal if you don't have a good reason why. Then you're like, well, how do I resolve this? And I'm not saying that people who did $20 were like, oh yeah, I love lying. That's not what we're saying here. What we're saying is that, they still didn't think lying was good, but they had a good reason why, right? They were at a good way to resolve the dissonance. In fact, all of the studies that are involved with cognitive dissonance, the real interesting part is how you resolve the dissonance. Because you go in there and you say, oh, you know what? The people who get they only get $1, actually like this task more. That sounds really funky and weird. The reason why it's funky and weird is not because the $1 is, they liked it better when they got $1 to do a boring task. No, the $1 was not enough to resolve the dissonance. The $1, so remember, everybody, they lied, Why did I, I don't think lying is a good thing. That clashes. Why did I do it? Gosh, I only got $1. That's not enough. I need more to resolve the dissonance. I need something else besides the dollar to be able to resolve the dissonance. And the answer is, you know what? I wouldn't lie for $1. I know I must have really liked it. Instead of having the money resolve the dissonance for them, like the $20 group, in the $1 group, the $1 wasn't enough. It wasn't enough to say, that's why I lied. And so I need another reason why. Oh, well, maybe I really kind of liked the actual task. That way I'm not lying. All right, so here's the question for you. How do participants resolve their dissonance about lying? They change their attitude toward the task. The task is the object. They change their evaluation of that object to make it seem like they didn't tell a lie. They change their evaluation, their cognition, so that it would resolve the dissonance. Okay, so that was the induced compliance paradigm. All right, the induced compliance paradigm. So we need to move forward to the next paradigm. Belief disconfirmation. In reality, like historically, belief disconfirmation was the first study that was done. And it was done by Festinger and his colleagues in 1956. Well, what they did is they actually, I don't know what's the right word here. They, I don't know, infiltrated is not quite the right word. They essentially joined an extreme religious group. Some people would call it a cult, perhaps. But this religious group believed that the end of the world was coming. Specifically, they believed that there would be a great flood to end the world, and that there was a specific date when this was going to happen. Well, it turned out there was no great flood on that date. And so what Festinger knew is Festinger and his colleagues, they knew that that this group was saying, hey, this flood is going to happen. So essentially, they joined the group to see what would happen when the flood never happened, right? To see what would happen after their belief was disconfirmed. And so what they did is they watched and they looked and they observed the different members of the group after the flood didn't happen. Well, it turns out that many of the people actually believed more in the group after the flood didn't happen. Now there were there was a chunk of members of that group that no longer believed in the group because, and many of them, especially the ones who were alone, who were not with other group members at the time that the flood was supposed to happen. So remember, there's a hard date of when this flood was supposed to happen. It didn't happen. So if the members were alone by themselves, they were much more likely to disbelieve in the group, right? To leave the group and say, you know what, this isn't right. This isn't true. The ones that were with other people, they were much more likely to, instead of disbelieve in the group, to believe in it more. What they did is they've come up with an explanation as to why it didn't happen. So for example, in that particular case, the reason why it didn't happen, according to the group members, was because they were righteous enough that God made the flood not happen. And then therefore, they actually became a little more zealous in their beliefs after that. The reason why this is a big deal is because there was a belief disconfirmation. There was dissonance involved with, hey, I believe this is going to happen. It didn't happen. That creates dissonance. How do we resolve the dissonance? Well, one way you could resolve the dissonance is not being a part of the group anymore. Another way you can resolve the dissonance is by coming up with an explanation as to why it might be, or to work even harder to help alleviate the feeling of dissonance that already occurred. Now, I got to be really careful here. I am not saying that all of your beliefs, especially in religion, are incorrect. That is not what I'm saying. That's not what I'm saying. Belief disconfirmation can happen in a lot of different ways, right? So you have a sports team that you really believe is going to win the championship. It doesn't happen. Well, why? And then you've got to go through the confirmation. This can happen for a lot of different things. And I'm not saying that all beliefs are false. I'm just saying that sometimes beliefs are disconfirmed. And what you do about that is how you resolve the dissonance that's created. Okay. Next paradigm, Before we talk about it, though, I need to ask you a question. Have you ever gone through an initiation? Now, I was gonna say hazing. Have you ever been hazed? But we don't say hazed anymore. What I'm talking about is an initiation process. Have you had to go through a specific process that required initiation, required a decent amount of effort to go through it? Now, if you were hazed, then yes, you have been gone through initiation. But have you gone through an initiation process? If you have, you may have experienced the next kind of paradigm, which has to do with effort justification. So let's talk about this first. So let's remind ourselves who we're discussing. This guy right here, that's Leon Festinger. He's the main cognitive dissonance guy. He had two graduate students while he was teaching at Stanford. This is Elliot Aronson, and this is Judson Mills. We already talked about Judson Mills because he is my academic father, right? So Elliot Aronson and Judson Mills were his graduate students during the time that he was working on his most famous cognitive dissonance research. Well, they actually came up with their own study about cognitive dissonance, which shows us the paradigm of effort justification. So Aronson and Mills in 1959, so it's published the same year as the Festinger Carlsmith study. Aronson and Mills were saying, hey, if I'm going to create dissonance, sometimes what people do is they put a lot of effort into something. And they feel dissonance because they don't feel like their effort was worth it. How do they resolve that dissonance that occurs? So this is the Aronson and Mills 1959 study. Now remember, this is 1959 at Stanford University. I'm not sure that all of this would happen quite the same way if we did a direct replication of Aronson and Mills. So just keep that in mind. Aronson and Mills took out an ad in the school newspaper, and they said, hey, we need people, specifically we need women, to join this discussion group about sex. So it's a discussion group about sex. Now remember, these are college-age women at Stanford in 1959. So keep that in mind. So we want you to come and talk about sex. So women responded to the ad. They came to the group and they said, okay, welcome, thank you. We're glad that you're willing to do this. We know that discussing sex can be a little bit taboo. So here's what we need you to do to make sure that you're ready to join this discussion group. We need you to read out loud this list of words. Half of the women read a list of words that were, very benign, kiss, hug, benign kind of words. Other women read words which I won't say out loud, right? These were pretty graphic words. Got it? Pretty graphic stuff. I honestly don't feel comfortable saying them out loud myself. That's the kind of words we're discussing here. So if you're a woman in this study, you either said the words which were pretty benign, or you said the naughty words. Okay? All right. Now, everybody in the group, everybody did that. They read their list of words. They said, thank you. Now, if you're ready to listen to the group, we do this over a microphone and a PA system so that people don't have to look face to face. They can talk a little bit more openly that way. So we're going to have you put on your headphones here and you can listen in. And then here's the microphone right here. But today they're going to discuss this book, and they show them a book. And they say, have you read this book? And the woman, of course, has not read that book and said, no, I haven't read that book. And they say, okay, well, then in this case, because this is your first time and you haven't read the book, we're just going to have you listen in. We're just going to have you listen in on this particular study. So they unplug the microphone. And then everyone listens to the same recording of a discussion group about the sex lives of, I can't remember if it's flies or frogs. I can't remember. It's boring, though. The point is everybody listens to exactly the same discussion group. And it is boring. It is a boring discussion group. So here's what's going on in everybody's brain then. I just said these words, and this was objectively a boring group. And remember, it's the same boring discussion. Everybody listened to the same boring discussion. Didn't matter what words you said out loud beforehand, everyone heard the same boring discussion. Well, here's what happens then. You create the imbalance because in 1959, in the United States, if you were a woman, it was culturally inappropriate to say the nasty words out loud. It was culturally inappropriate. So, at least for the women who said the nasty words, there was a lot of negative arousal, a lot of dissonance. I'm a proper lady, and I just said these nasty words out loud in front of strangers. You see the conflict, you see the dissonance that's going on. So that means that there's more negative arousal for the women who said the nasty words compared to the ones who didn't, who said the more benign words. The control words, remember, those are the benign words. The dirty words, those are the nasty ones, right? And so what happens then is a resolution of the dissonance. At the end of that whole discussion group, they listened in, etc. Everyone was asked, how much did you like the group members, etc. And what they found was that the women who said the dirty words, the women who said the nasty words, liked the group significantly more, even though it was exactly the same discussion that they heard. They heard the same thing. Word for word is exactly the same. But the women who said the dirty words liked it significantly more. Why? Because they were experiencing more dissonance. They were experiencing that negative arousal. Gosh, I'm a proper lady. I just said these nasty words. Oh man, why would I do that? I don't know. Why would I know. I must have really liked the group. So the behavior was, I said these nasty words. The belief about myself is, I'm a proper lady. It's clashing. How do I resolve it? Well, I know. I must have really enjoyed the group. You compare that to the women who said the control words, the benign words. Those women, they're like, yeah, that was boring. They didn't have any real dissonance to resolve. They weren't motivated to change their attitude about the group because there really wasn't much dissonance that they needed to resolve. The idea here is effort justification. The women who said the dirty words had more effort. They had to put more effort into being in the group. And once they were in the group, they needed to say, why on earth did I do all that effort? Why did I do that hard thing? I know. I must have really liked it. Hazing works that way. Now, I got to be careful here. I'm not saying that you're only liking things because of the nasty effort that you put into it. That's not what I'm saying. But I am saying that people who put in more effort often like that group more because they put in the effort, not because the group is qualitatively better, but because they've got this dissonance that they need to resolve. Why would I do all those illegal things that this group of random guys said I should do just to be in their group? Oh, I know. The group must be really awesome. I must really like it. It must really be worth it. Hazing is a form of creating extra effort, which has to be justified by the members of the group. Why did I go through all that awful hazing? Oh, I know. It must have been worth it. I must really like the group. The last paradigm we need to talk about is the free choice paradigm. So before we do this, let me ask you, have you ever bought a computer? And if you bought a computer, did you come down to a choice between two different kinds of computer? Now, how likely would you be to choose the brand to buy a computer in the future that was of a different brand? All right, the free choice paradigm is a very basic idea in cognitive dissonance, and it's pretty easy to set up. To do this, I'm actually going to have you watch part of a TED Talk done by Dan Gilbert. And he's going to talk a lot about happiness, specifically synthesized happiness. Now remember, we're not there yet. Don't worry about this idea of synthesized happiness. Worry about the way that he did his study and what it is about the paradigm. He's going to talk very distinctly about how he uses the free choice paradigm, and then we can talk about what that means for happiness when we're done. So go ahead and watch this video. Okay, so you just watched this video from Dan Gilbert where he's talking about the free choice paradigm. Now, the paradigm is very simple. It's the idea that here's a bunch of different choices. And in the first case that he did was Monet prints, right? And you got to choose which ones you like. Just rank them, which ones you like the best. And thank you for doing this. As a prize, I'm going to give you these. I'm going to give you a choice between these two. Now, the choice that they give them is always between their middle ones, right? So if you said this is the top, and you know then that's the top, right? But that's the best. People are always going to choose that one. If you know the one at the bottom is the worst, that's the worst. But in the middle, it's kind of hard to distinguish, right? So if I've got, which one I like the best, and if you're looking at like 7 of them, and we're looking in the middle like 3 versus 4 or 4 versus 5, it probably could have gone either way, right? Probably could have gone either way because they're right in the middle. So what we say is, hey, you have a choice between these two. Which do you prefer? They choose one of them. And then in the most basic form is you follow up a few days, a few weeks later on, and you ask them, all right, here's the same prints, rank them and tell us which one you like better. The answer is that people will say that the one that they chose is better. It'll go up in position. And the one that they didn't choose goes down. What people are doing is, when you have to choose between two things that are very similar to each other, you're going to have some dissonance. So think about buying a car, right? So I have a Honda Civic, say, and so I look at the Honda Civic and I'm like, oh, I'm going to buy it's between the Honda Civic or the Nissan Altima. What is it going to be? A Civic or an Altima? Civic or an Altima? Oh, I don't know. I'm going to choose the Civic. Now, what would it be like for me if I hear a lot of great stuff about a Nissan Altima after that? That would create dissonance. It creates dissonance for me because I've made that choice. I made the choice, and now I want to make sure that I don't like the dissonance. So what I'm going to do is I've got to find ways of thinking that my choice was even better, right? And that the Nissan Altima is even worse. When you bought a computer, if you had two that you were thinking about, gosh, is it going to be the Dell or the Apple? The Dell or the Apple? The Dell? I don't know which one I'm going to choose. I'll choose the Apple. And now you're like, oh yeah, Apple it's the best. Definitely the best. Dell, I wouldn't do that. I would never do a Dell. In reality, you were really close. It was really kind of up in the air. But now, because you have made your choice, you don't want to experience any dissonance anymore. So you're going to denigrate the Dell. You're gonna alleviate or elevate the Mac, so that you can feel good about your choice and not experience the ideas of dissonance. Now, everything that we have talked about today is cognitive dissonance, meaning that the idea of dissonance is meant to be a cognitive idea. Your attitude is an evaluation of an object cognitively. In that video, Dan Gilbert, who's a very famous social psychologist at Harvard, was talking about affect, which is feeling states. And he was talking about synthesized happiness. Well, the reason why he's talking about that is because Dan Gilbert is one of the major players, the major researchers with affective forecasting, which we've already discussed. The idea that we're not very good at understanding how we're going to feel. And what he's saying is that idea of dissonance actually has an affective part to it, a feeling part to it. And that we create satisfaction when we elevate the Mac and denigrate the Dell. We are creating a certain amount of happiness with our choice. And what he's doing, when he talked about the people with amnesia, he's saying that maybe this affective aspect of it is more than just a thought process in your brain. Maybe it's a little bit more fundamental, that even people who don't remember and therefore they are not processing it cognitively the same way, maybe they're experiencing it as well in an affective way. We're going to talk about emotions later on, but that idea of the connection between cognition and emotion's a form of feeling state, affect means feeling states, that connection is tied together, and it can be very strong. But he certainly shows that idea of wanting to not experience negative, in his case he was talking about feelings, negative affect, because of choices that we made. And so people who have the opportunity to take back their choice actually feel worse about it, right? Because the dissonance is, oh, maybe I should have done something different. Maybe I should have chosen that one instead. And you resolve that dissonance by not having the choice, or by elevating your choice, and or by denigrating the thing you didn't choose. All right, thanks everybody.